So good morning. Today I'm going to talk about the power of causal analysis applied to network security. So first, a little bit of background. So basically, I don't need to tell you guys that network security is getting a lot harder these days. And one of the reasons is because there's a lot more traffic on networks. And what this does is cause a lot more security events. And it makes it, gives you a lot more information to look at. Also, attackers are getting a lot more sophisticated. And what this causes, what they can do now is they can hide beneath the increased noise, largely due to the increased bandwidth. And not only that, people are having to open up their networks to people they normally wouldn't trust. So this might be vendors to let them into customer databases, might even be people who are already in your network, employees that probably shouldn't be trusted. So a lot of the existing solutions are point solutions. So for example, IDSs, they can tell you somebody's trying to break into the perimeter. IPSs can tell you that and try to prevent it in many cases. But unfortunately, there really is no such thing as intrusion prevention. It's more, at best, intrusion reduction. So firewalls and can keep people out. VPNs can allow you to open up parts of your network to other people without exposing the entire network to the internet. But they still have some problems as well. And network-based anomaly detection can tell you that something's going on somewhere in your network, but it can't tell you how it's related to other things. And there's nothing that really ties them all together in a good way. There's nothing that can tell you that this IDS alert over here corresponds to this oddness in your network that was picked up by anomaly detection. And that's where causality analysis comes in. So what causality analysis does is it connects all the individual elements of a network-based attack. So this illustration here, what it shows up on top is a number of raw events, just things happening in the network. Some of them are anomalies. Some of them is just normal traffic. So down below that, various anomaly detection, IDSs, pick out a subset of those, and they can alert you on those, but they don't show you how they relate. And that's what causality analysis does, is it ties all these different pieces together. So one good thing about it is that it can leverage existing techniques. It doesn't require a whole new security infrastructure, but it can be used to identify and mitigate the source of the attack, the method of the attack, and also damage from the attack. One thing it doesn't do is definitively tell you that one event uniquely caused another event. I was having a discussion with somebody about this a few days ago, and they brought up that somewhere on the East Coast, they found that there seemed to be a causal relationship between soft water and cancer incidents. And what it actually turned out is the soft water was leaching beryllium out of the pipes, and that was what was actually causing the increase in cancer. The soft water was a contributing factor, but it wasn't the unique cause. And that's kind of what causality analysis shows you, is it shows you all the contributing factors to an anomaly as it occurs. So I'd like to illustrate this with a fairly simple example. And just to abstract all the network issues out of it, I'm going to use an embassy black tie party. So in this embassy, there's a safe with some secret documents in it. There's a key hidden somewhere in the embassy that opens a safe. And there's also a light switch. So at some point, all the guests arrive for the party. And these guests are all ambassadors from various countries. Some are trusted, some aren't. And as you probably know, even the ambassadors from trusted countries should only be trusted so far. There's all kinds of instances of friendly spying that we heard about throughout the Cold War and up to the present. So what happens at this black tie party is at some point, the key disappears. Sometime after that, say 9 o'clock, the safe is opened and the documents are taken out. And then 3 seconds after that, the light's turned off. And the reason the light was probably turned off is to cover the escape of the person who took the documents. So one good thing about this embassy is we've got video surveillance everywhere, so we can see almost everything that's going on, can hear almost every conversation. And what we find is that we have the video surveillance shows us who turned off the light and who took the documents very clearly. It does not show us who took the key. And that's a very important fact because all of these people are related to the problem, and we need to do something about each and every one of them. So the thing is, we do have the surveillance of everything going on. We see all the handshakes, and the likelihood is that the key was passed by handshakes from the individual who took it to the individual who opened the safe. Also, there was probably a message passed by these handshakes to go underneath the audio surveillance as well, so that that wouldn't be picked up, telling the person who turned off the light to do so. So what causal analysis lets us do is track through all of those handshakes. And back to the, yeah, get that too. The notebook seems to have frozen up. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so track through all of these handshakes back to the cause. And what we see here is that there's only one individual who is near the key who has a causal relationship to both the light being turned off and the documents being stolen. So that's pretty strong evidence that that one individual was responsible for taking the key. So there's a couple of important relationships here. First of all, there's causal relationships. And what the causal relationships show us is the relationship between the stolen key and the documents going missing, as well as the relationship between the stolen key and the light being turned off. There's also some non-causal relationships that are picked up. So the non-causal relationship of note is between the light being turned off and the documents going missing. So there was a relationship between those. The light was turned off probably to cover the documents being taken out of the embassy, but one did not cause the other. So the relationship that we can pick up with causal analysis is that they both have the same causal predecessor. So let me go into a little more detail then of what I mean by a causal relationship. So here I have a line essentially for each individual, and two events are causal if they're performed by the same individual. So A1 is causally related to A2. Two events are also causal if they occur because of a handshake between two individuals. So essentially we're transferring causality from one individual to another, as is the case here with A1 and B2. So A1 is causally related to B2. What's important is we also have to consider the transitive causal relationship. So in this case, A1 is causally related to Z1 because there's a path, a causal path from A1 all the way to Z1. Also, just to illustrate that this isn't purely a temporal relationship, A1 has no relationship to event C1, and also there's no relationship the other way, so C1 is not causally related to A1. So all of this was a metaphor for a network. So the guests correspond to network nodes, the handshakes correspond to communication events, and the safe corresponds to some high-value asset. So the embassy attack actually corresponds to a large set of attack classes that occur on networks. So one example is something we call the hide and sneak attack, where somebody breaks in through a firewall. They slowly hop around, say over 48 hours, to a bunch of different machines to mask their origin, and then they steal the customer database and copy it out of the network. Another attack that has a similar profile is what we call the email server exploit. So with this, an individual uses a buffer overflow to get into the email server, which is in the DMZ, and they install some malware. At some point after that, a client connects, and the malware is pushed through to the client. After that, the client's machine is compromised, and they use that to crawl through the network looking for credit card numbers and eventually send them out of the network using instant messaging. So what these attacks have in common is essentially a distinct set of phases. So in the first phase, we call it the entry phase. They just gain access to the network. So following that is a network discovery phase, where they look around to see what's in the network, what resources, what databases, what file servers, and then they gain access to that key information. And then the final phase is escaping with that information. So where causal analysis helps with this is it ties all of these distinct phases together. So you can see whether an entry phase was a contributing factor to a discovery phase, or whether a network discovery phase was a contributing factor to an information discovery phase, and so on. So the benefits of causality analysis are basically that it lets us track an attack in progress. And we can use this proactively by determining that an attack is in progress, finding out what could possibly be affected by that attack, and then doing something about it, either sealing off the resources, cleaning up the machines that seem to be compromised, sealing off the network. We can also use this reactively. So after we determine an attack has occurred, we can go back and see what machines have been affected and clean them up, find out what assets have been compromised. And this is important for things like Sarbanes-Oxley. You have to report if anybody has gotten to assets and leak them, especially if they pertain to privacy information on your customers. And then also you can use this to track back to the source of the attack. So what's interesting about this is it's logistically very complicated. So there's millions of normal events surrounding the suspicious activity. And the suspicious relationships just are hard to pick out of that. So the thing is, there's really no time to walk through all the possible event sequences to determine a causal relationship between two events. And if the attack is slow, it's a lot harder to find because there's just so much noise in between each point of the attack, each phase of the attack. And also there may be multiple breaches at once. So just because two things are happening in the same network, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily related. So what we need to address this is somehow getting enough visibility into the network. And this includes not only the anomalous activity, but also the normal activity as well. Because things that look normal now may actually be passing malware between, or passing, be contributing factors to a problem that does not show up on the small scale. And we need a relatively fast approach to computing this transitive causal relationship. And by relatively fast, I mean it has to be constant time. As events accumulate, we can't have the time of that going up. So we have to be able to deliver a rapid yes-no answer on the relationship between any two events. So we've done this, and what our approach was to monitor all the network traffic at key points and to look at alerts from various devices, the IDS, firewall, and so forth, and to store all of this on a high-performance data repository. And then we have a symbolic way of representing the transitive relationship that does meet the requirements. It does take linear space on the amount of events that come in. It does give answers in constant time. And it takes about 4 terabytes of data to store a month's worth of, 4 terabytes of disk to store a month's worth of data, which is a lot, but with disks coming down in price, it really doesn't cost that much anymore. So I'd like to show you some real results of this. So this is a slammer worm propagation. And one thing you see over here is this starting event. What this is somebody brought in a notebook that had the slammer worm on it. And from there, it launched itself to various other network hosts. What they were able to do from this trace is go back to the person with a notebook, clean up their notebook, and give them a lecture about how to keep it better secured in the future. So another attack is stepping stone using NetBIOS and also doing host scans. So what was going on here is a network insider, basically an employee of the company, was just playing around to see what they could do, to see if they could just cascade through these hosts. And so what you see here is they start a host scan, they pick a machine, they jump to that machine, start another host scan, pick a machine, jump to that machine, and so on. What they were able to do with this is go back and again give the individual a stern talking to. He admitted what he was doing, and I'm not sure what the consequences of that were, but I'm sure they took care of it. So in conclusion, causal analysis is actually a very powerful new approach to analyzing the events going on in a network. Yeah, let me go to the conclusion page here. So it can provide insight into causal relationships, but also non-causal relationships as well, as was the case with the common predecessor relationship, where the person at the light switch was related to the person stealing the documents, but it wasn't a causal relationship. But the thing is, you need a symbolic approach to provide a rapid yes/no answer to that, because there really is no time to search through tons of links every time you want a question answered. And also, it's not quite a silver bullet. So sometimes relationships it highlights are ambiguous. So sometimes there might be multiple contributing factors to an event that goes on in the network. And sometimes additional analysis is required. So it doesn't necessarily stand out that this is what was happening. You might have to look at it a little closer to interpret what the causal chain is telling you. So that's basically it for my talk. You can contact me at ken.hines@graniteedge.net. And also, Granite Edge has a booth in the back, and I'll be at that booth as well today. Okay. So if you have any questions now, yes? Multiple VLANs that, yeah. So basically, you need to tie in to the routers so that they can tell you that a link going from one address space is essentially the same as the link going into the other address space. But that's enough information. Yes?
You have a concept of a node on the network that you store for a period of time. How do you handle changes in the concept of any of those TAC?
Right. So we store the node abstractly. So we don't assign necessarily an IP address to it. We can store it by the MAC. We have a number of ways of doing that. And as the IP address changes due to DHCP renewal of contracts, we can track that as well and say, although this host at this time was 172.16.0.97, it's now 172.16.0.220, right? And we can tie those. Yeah, or we can tie into the DHCP servers as well. Yeah. Yes. Oh. Okay, either one of you. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Whoops. Okay, there we go.
In the first instance, time one, you scan all these other machines, and then suddenly another machine can expect the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's just because that machine has
Right.
back. And all these relationships, I don't see really that there's a causal relationship, but just by these hosts talking maybe back to some others and being able to get the change.
Right. So again, it's not saying, this diagram is not saying definitively that the initial host scan uniquely caused the second host scan to occur. But it does show some circumstances that indicate that's likely. And in this case, the person who was doing it actually admitted that that's what they had done. So as I said, it doesn't necessarily give you the answer without additional analysis. You might have to look at it. You might have to talk to people to figure out what was going on. Okay. Yes?
The value proposition of this tool is to protect against the insider threat. Sometimes the insider threat is a person who already has the appropriate access to the appropriate resources and just take more than they're supposed to.
Mhm.
How is this tool protecting against that kind of threat?
Yeah, so that's an aspect I didn't talk about, but anomaly detection is another part of Granite Edge's tool suite. And what that does is it looks to see what access that you typically use, what's your typical use pattern. And if you go beyond that typical use pattern, it flags that as an anomaly, and then that ties into causal chains. So if you're normally doing things that you're not supposed to do, that type of anomaly detection won't pick it up either. And in that case, we also have an ability to assign policies. So, but no matter what you do, there's going to be some way that somebody can get through the cracks. Oh, okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Very sensitive to having all the links in the causal relationship. So if there's any one link missing, either because the device is not monitoring correctly or a hacker here extracts someone, you're not going to be able to do anything.
Yes, that's true. Actually, let me expand on that a bit. So you'll see the halves that go, the halves of the chain that go into the piece that's not reporting links, and the halves coming out. So you won't have the complete chain, but you'll have the pieces. And if you know that it wasn't reporting, then you can stitch those together as well. So. Okay. Yes?
I have a question just regarding the size of, if you go back to the slide where you show how many events or how much storage space it actually is, about 4 terabytes.
Yes.
And that's on a typical network. I've seen networks, the network volume just on a 100 megabit link is about a terabyte a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Store.
Yeah, we're not storing all of the network data.
How are you guys representing this in your database?
Right. Yeah, so basically we're abstracting it to events. So if I connect to another host, that's one event. It doesn't matter how much traffic I send, right? That's a single event. When I close that connection, that's another event. And it might report in that closed connection how much traffic was transferred, but it will not include all of the traffic. So it's not a network VCR.
Okay, so it's based on the number of events that it sees from the devices that it's monitoring?
Yes, yes.
How many events do you guys see, like to make up that 4 terabytes? What?
Yeah, so typically we're seeing approximately on the order of 24 million to 50 million a day. Yes. So, yes.
What's a typical enterprise to you? How many nodes?
Yeah, so basically the 4 terabyte of data, what we're actually looking at for a single box is 2,000 nodes. To scale up to 10,000, 30,000, and so on, you need more boxes and of course more memory. Yes.
I think the hard question is going to be, how does this scale? Like, go from 2,000 to 3,000, is it a linear increase or is it an exponential increase later?
It's a linear increase. Yes, that's right. So, yep.
Typical organizations might have multiple attacks going on, so that will add lots of noise in your monitor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one thing that this doesn't show, what these examples don't show, is that if there are multiple attacks, it'll show separate chains for each of those, right? So, and sometimes they might cross. So you might have 2 attacks that cross the same host and then get causally linked that way. But in practice, we find that hasn't happened a great deal. Yes. Okay, is that?
I gotta get other people on.
Okay.
Ken Hines, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.